We're so glad you're able to join us today for our next edition of the 49er Industry Chat. My name is Noemi Guevara, and I am the Director of Alumni Engagement here at Cal State Long Beach. Before we start, I would like to let you know that this session is being recorded and will be on demand on our website at csulb.edu/alumni. And now, I would like to introduce one of our hosts, Lucia Cost, from the class of 1975, who currently serves on our CSULB Alumni Council. Lucia?
Hi, Lucia Galindo Cos, alumni from 1975, and I'm really honored to introduce to you today Matt, you know what, I've just lost it, I'm sorry, I apologize, Pat Mamaril, and he's with the LA Department of Water and Power, and I think
We just lost Lucia, but I see her coming back on.
It's fine.
Apologize, technology today.
That happened to me already once today.
Wait a couple seconds to see if she comes back on. I think there we have her. Lucia, can you hear us?
Yes, I can hear you and I'm back.
Okay.
Oh, did you hear me before?
No.
Oh my God, I just did the whole introduction. Okay,
Okay.
let me do it again. Matt Mamaril graduated from Long Beach State with a BS in electrical engineering in 2009. He is currently an electrical engineering supervisor with the Los Angeles Department of Water and Power. Having entered the workforce during the peak of the last recession, Matt will share his professional experience and advice on how to find career and growth opportunities during challenging times. Matt has engineering experience in the private and public sectors across various industries, including industrial telecom, power, and fire protection. So leading today's industry, let me introduce Matt Mamaril.
Thank you, Lucia. So I'll feel free to share my screen right now. Let's see. Okay. Okay, hi everyone. My name is Matt Mamaril. I am electrical engineering supervisor, despite my summer quarantine appeal right now. But so I'm a first level supervisor for Los Angeles Department of Water and Power for fire protection engineering. So I thank you to Cynthia and her staff for setting this up for this 49er industry chat. And when I thought about what to present, I thought the target audience should be about, students, graduates, unemployed. And I thought, let's present something that's important, to this audience. So, let's talk about the career struggles that I went through when I graduated during the peak of the last, Great Recession in 2009, and the recession hit in 2008. So I was pretty much at the peak of it. So moving on, let's go on to the next slide. So here's an overview of pretty much the presentation in terms of my career advancement. I want to focus a little bit more on the private sector because, that's pretty much where the job security is and that I had. So I have this little sign here: the road to success is always under construction. I felt like there was so many roadblocks coming along the way as I progressed my career, and it just a lot of hindrances and things just came across unexpectedly. So moving on, graduating during the peak of the recession, So I graduated in June 2009, but currently there's about 42 million Americans unemployed at a current 19% unemployment rate, I believe, and some project it's going to go over, 20%. For me, it peaked at about 10%, and 42 million Americans unemployed to this day is like the size of California being completely unemployed. That's a significant amount, and I'm sure that students, graduates, are it's dawning on their minds like, am I going to find a job? Especially for 2021, which is the year after the recession, because at the time when I graduated, a lot of the people who were unemployed, let's say engineers, the senior engineers could fall back onto the mid-level jobs, and the mid-levels can fall back into the entry. But a graduate who doesn't have any direct experience, maybe too overqualified for an internship because they don't apply for it, or too underqualified for entry level because the competition is too high. So that's the predicament that I was in. I didn't have any internship experience because I couldn't apply for one the last year, and I didn't have any direct engineering experience. So I graduated, and at the end of it all, it took me about 5.5 months after to get a job, but the number of applications that I applied to over 700 job applications. Now, I was averaging about 1 to 2 new interviews a month. I was getting maybe round 2, round 3, round 4 interviews, but pretty much the new ones that I was landing was about 1 to 2 interviews a month. So I pretty much made it my job to find a job. I got into routine, woke up at the right time, went to the gym, built my confidence, and I used every resource that was there possibly. I used, the Career Counseling Center. They helped me exceptionally with my resume and cover letter review, and they helped me fluff my resume skills. I applied everywhere. I went to LinkedIn, all the job fairs, and even applied at DWP for the first time. But also, what I suggest is that don't feel underqualified to apply for the job, because I applied to so many jobs that were like 3 to 5 years experience, 5 to 10 years of experience, and some of those jobs I did actually get. Never discount yourself. And after each interview, I suggest that you write down the questions asked so that you can be in preparation for the next interview. But by month 3 and month 4, I didn't really get any job offers, and I thought, what should I do? So I thought a little bit outside the box. I thought, okay, let's probably look at jobs that were within my 10-mile radius and see what I can do. So I literally went on Google Maps, and I just thought, okay, here's an engineering company. Oh, here's an engineering company. And I started listing them down one by one. And I actually looked at their website, saw what they did, inquired with their HR, because a lot of times these companies either don't have the time to, run it by their HR and post it, or they just, don't post it. And so you just have to ask. And a lot of them actually gave me good feedback in terms of, giving me like, oh, we're hiring, we're not hiring. Which is actually pretty good. And a lot of them may be small companies, but in my opinion, the small companies are the best to learn the skills. And one other unconventional thing I did was that, okay, I saw a group of engineering companies here in maybe about 5 miles from my house. I'm gonna go eat at this local Subway, and then I'm just gonna see during the lunch scene and see if they're gonna, come by. So one time they did. And I was in line, and then I asked the guy, "Oh, yeah, small talk about sandwiches." But I asked him like, "Oh, I noticed that you work at, Kinder Morgan or Chevron. I'm an engineer. I just graduated. You have any jobs?" "Okay, no." "Okay, all right, sorry." So, I tried that a couple of times. That really didn't pan out. But in terms of like inquiring, I mean, that really helped a lot. But for me, I just gave myself a deadline, and I had only this much cash runway after I graduated. And I considered, working out of state, working in Texas, because that's where the skills were at the time. And I thought, if I don't get a job within a year, I'll just go to Texas and gain the skills and just stay there for a couple of years. But luckily, I found my first job because I got better with each interview. You just Google some interview tips. I'm pretty sure it's pretty much standard, but try to keep a log of the interview questions that they're asking you. And also, there's a lot of things that you can't or you wouldn't be able to be learned online, maybe through YouTube or something, but get a feel for the body language. You know, you want to be able to speak to the interviewer or the panel in a way that you know what you're talking about. So for instance, let's say I were to talk to them and reach in closer and closer to show that I know what I'm talking about. But if it gets too intense, you kind of want to ease back and show that you're easy to talk to. So you have that sort of dynamic. So there's certain things you can do where they sort of mirror that feel from you. So, you know, kind of follow up on that. Maybe look on YouTube. There's some helpful tips on how to present yourself and dress conservatively. You know, women wear closed toe shoes, you know, dress appropriately. But you know what, my biggest suggestion is that, you know, look for internships early on if you can. And for me, I was considering getting my master's degree at the time, but I couldn't afford to get myself into more debt. So the best thing that I suggested, or that I suggest, is to gain the hands-on skills now, because a higher degree is great, but it doesn't necessarily guarantee you to land that first job. What will land you that first entry-level job into the company, it would be the skills. So gain the skills first. And then I would say, if you want to promote it within the company or to another company, then at least get the master's degree then, because then that way, you know, all you have to do is get your foot in the door. That's what's most important.
Matt,
Yep.
there's one question. So is in hindsight, was there any networking opportunities that if you had known about, you would have taken advantage of?
Well, I've taken advantage of a lot of job fairs. I've taken advantage of a lot of feedback through, you know, like, I don't know what job postings they have, but back in my time, they had like Monsters and, you know, LinkedIn still at the time. But I think the biggest helpful resource to me was actually the on-campus interview, because that gave me the most higher return on like callbacks in terms of interviewing. So that was my biggest resource. But I know someone in Raytheon actually told me this. He said at a job fair, I was talking to them one time, and they said, you know, a lot of the people here in this little meeting or job fair, a lot of you guys are actually not gonna, you know, I'm not gonna hear back from you, but a few of you, if you do something unconventional, like meet me at a lunch scene or meet me like when I'm gonna go to my daughter's recital or something, then I'll, you know, respect that hustle of yours. So, I mean, there are certain tips that you can do unconventionally, but if it gets down to that point, so I just say, make it your job to pretty much find a job and use every resource possible.
Okay.
Okay, so let's see. So I got my first job at a small size company. I believe this one was because I was reaching out to all the small companies, and this is the best company I would say I worked for. I stayed here for about 2.5 years. So it's called Senetcom Digital Incorporated, and it's a very small company. There are less than 10 employees, but we basically designed, built from scratch, installed, and troubleshooted the wireless telecommunication radios for various industrial companies like Chevron, Shell, Kinder Morgan, and our biggest customer was LADWP. You know, I learned to use a spectrum analyzer. I got real life, you know, RF signal to noise ratio applications, antenna designs, electrical control systems, programming, soldering, commercial off-the-shelf integration. But the reason that the CEO hired me was because of one skill that popped out was different from the other ones. It was because he said, oh, you have this skill in cadence, because I was majoring in analog and digital electronics at the time. And even though we don't use cadence whatsoever in the company, he said, oh, it kind of popped out. So, you know, list all your skills you have and may pop out, and maybe that may be something that may, you know, be the bait to actually get that interview. You know, just show some enthusiasm, read about the company before interviewing. But the reason why I left was because due to it being a small company, was that it was an insufficient amount of salary. You know, owners didn't share my vision in potentially growing the company, and the company moved from Torrance to Oceanside, which is pretty much an 80-mile drive that I was commuting for about a year. You know, commute was not very good. But so the pros and cons of it. A small size company is pretty much perfect to learn everything you need to know. you gain the skills as quickly as possible, but it also helped me realize my passion, the love to learn and to build. The cons is that, I traded salary for skills, just as you work, you kind of have a feel for your salary, stay in touch with those you can grow from as well, because like, for instance, the CEOs are still my mentors that I follow up with them every now and then, and just keep that door open. And because of the skills that I learned in this job, I got job offers from IT, Verizon, Ericsson, government, actually a government agency that told me not to even disclose what the agency is. And what's funny is that I went to meet with this agency, and then the agency said like, oh, we want to interview the next day. And I said, I don't have much time. I'm going to take my engineer license at the time. And I said, no, I want to see you. So I literally next morning, I went in there in skinny jeans and some Chuck Taylor shoes, and it was, and I wasn't dressed appropriately, but he saw that I had such appeal. Was very good at RF telecommunications. And he was really impressed. So I got the job offer, within 6 weeks later, to work in Washington, D.C. But unfortunately, I denied it due to my other reasons, because I really wanted to work for DWP. So I tried DWP for the second time. Yeah, I didn't get it. So, so let's moving on to my next job. Let's see here. So medium-sized company. I worked for a medium-sized company called for Spec Services. So at the time, there were about 200 employees. The bread and butter was pretty much designing power, telecom, and control design drawings for clients' construction like Oxy Long Beach, Kinder Morgan. But the reason I got hired was a particular skill. I was good at electrical control systems, and so they do like ladder logic programming for their programmable logic controllers. And the reason why I left was because I pretty much learned everything within a year. I learned how to design electrical drawings, speak in a public setting, how to bid on projects, but it wasn't hands-on. It was more of like project management. So there wasn't much of a design learning curve. And at that time, and I think it was 2013, I obtained my professional engineering license. And I thought, I could pretty much do this on my own. I could be a contractor and eventually get the capital to build my own business. So that's what I suggest, when you're early in your career, I suggest, just take a few chances. And the pros of this is that, working in oil and gas companies, they typically pay higher and you learn a lot of industrial design skills. But usually, if you're really ambitious, you kind of want to learn as much as you can, just leave. But when the cons of this is that try to gauge how much skills the company can offer you. Where do you see yourself in 3, 5, 7 years? And that's something you need to think about if you really want to, early on in your career, you want to learn as much as quickly as possible. So my third job was a contractor. I worked for DirecTV, and as you know, DirecTV was now AT&T, but at the time, before they were acquired, they're pretty much industrial or aerospace company. And so my PE wasn't really applicable, but I was contracting at the time because I was attracted to the high 6-figure salary. So it's a very large company, and they basically do uplink, downlink, RF, TV service provider. And the reason I got hired was, well, I was underqualified. The job description was 5 to 10 years experience. I had 2.5, and it wasn't in aerospace. It was in industrial telecommunications. But the reason why they hired me was because, of my first job, obviously, and I had this enthusiasm and creativity with RF communication equipment. And the reason why I left was because they suddenly canceled my contract. We were in a recession. I honestly didn't perform at the pace the company wanted me to. And as a lessons learned, as a contractor, they expect you to perform. There isn't much of a learning curve. They want you to perform, day in, day out. And also in a typical large corporation, there are some politics as well. So I guess lessons learned from this is that, don't be fooled by the high dollar amount. I was enticed to this contract for this company due to the generous 6-figure salary because I thought it would help me reach my goal in building capital. But if you value, your full medical, your dental, your pension, your stable income, I do not suggest contracting if you want to have a stable amount of income, especially during these times of the recession where you want some sort of stable income.
Pat,
Yep.
so in engineering, do you see a lot of turnover, and is it acceptable in that field to change positions and employers every 2 to 3 years to continue to build your career?
Yeah, I suggest it, especially you have to be smart about, getting to the company. Try to gauge every company you get into, like how much of a design learning curve. For me, it was more like I was trying to get into everything, because I thought, okay, I could learn this, I could become proficient at power telecommunication. I could eventually do it on my own as a contractor. And lately I've seen, well, at the time I saw a lot of turnover. And I think recently I've seen a lot of entry level jobs just being stopped hiring. For instance, at my current company, we have put a hiring freeze. And but just 6 months ago, we were hiring like crazy, 100 engineers here, 100 engineers here. But, the entry level jobs have come to a stop. We're slowly hiring more. I'm getting a couple more associate engineers under my group. So it's slowly coming back, but I think it depends on, certain parameters like, the pandemic, the rioting, the closing and restarting the economy. It's really unexpected. So, some economists are projecting over 20%. So I really feel for the entry level engineers or entry level people in general. But the best thing I could say is that just try to gain the skills needed, and hopefully we'll come to that. Hopefully we'll still be hiring for entry level people right out of college.
Pat, was there early in your career any mentor that really helped you? Or how do you feel about finding mentors out there within the industry?
I think a good thing is actually, if you have a particular passion and interest, I would suggest just reaching out to maybe some online forums, maybe LinkedIn messaging, say that you maybe need some guidance. For me, it was actually my boss, my first job boss. They became my mentors. They taught me a lot of career and personal values about, what it really takes to actually progress your career. And and they kind of guide me to gain my PE, and they guide me to go through the tough times in my career. And so I feel like you just kind of have to open the door to everyone. I suggest that, like, getting your job, maybe you may not know that your supervisor may be your mentor. I didn't know it at the time. I just say, just leave the door open, and, don't burn any bridges. So one downturn in my career was the unemployment line. So that was an interesting time for me. So basically, how did I feel? I felt, and hopefully none of you and who are listening to this have to go through unemployment, but currently, you pretty much get 6 months of salary. You only get a certain amount of, I think I was only getting like 300 or 400 a week, something like that, which wasn't enough. But the day pretty much my contract ended, I was going to a Weezer concert, and I thought, I feel like, this is not a good day to, enjoy the festivities here. And I felt like I wasn't good enough. But being unemployed, it forced me to reassess, what is my minimum standard of living? Like, for instance, how much money is enough to live in LA? I need about 85,000 a year, after taxes, rent, utilities, car insurance, food, not including investments. I was pretty much paying $400 a month on Kaiser insurance. It was pretty, you get a feel for how much things cost, when you're unemployed. But, I needed a job, but I wasn't in despair because I had a lot of the skills needed. At the time, I actually went back to CSULB job fairs, and, I started to, I felt really old, I just like, what's going I'm like always full circle coming back to here. But, just pick yourself back up. It's okay to self-reflect and be open to people's suggestions, but don't ruminate, that, oh, I'm not. Don't remind yourself that being fired was your fault. In particular, it's the best skill you can have is your confidence in yourself, your grit, picking yourself back up. So I basically found a job after contracted for about another 2 more months. So I contracted again for this small company called Veridin, which is industrial manufacturing for linear and pulse width modulated amplifiers. So it's kind of like a startup company at the time. They're serving both the CNC and milling machines. It was a small company, and the reason I joined is because I needed something that was hands-on, get back to basics, build my skills as necessary. I was getting about 30% less contracted pay than DirecTV, but at least it gave me the skills needed that would benefit me in the future, is what I was thinking. The reason why I left was because I never stopped interviewing. I eventually got the offer from DWP within that time, and usually with DWP could take anywhere from 6 months to a year from the time you interview to actually get hired. And this is the third time I applied to DWP, the third time since I graduated. But I needed stability. I needed to network more. I thought it was a good opportunity. I thought it would be a great way to build my capital in case I wanted to, run a business one time. I learned, and the pros and cons from this small company was that, I learned hands-on skills. It was a great team to work for to reach toward a goal of building a company, which was, that was great. But it was also, the cons were that it was a salary-based company. So you work your own time if you don't get it. You work your own time if you get behind on certain things. So I suggest if you can, try to get an hourly or salary non-exempt job where the hours you work, the hours you get paid for, if you can. So the fifth job was obviously a DWP, which is a large publicly owned, privately kind of ran utility. So water and power, we provided for the city of Los Angeles. I specifically work in the power sector. I'm a first level supervisor, and the majority of my experience has to deal with customer station design. I stayed here for about 4 to 5 years. So basically what station design is that, or customer station design is that all the downtown buildings you see, or high power consumers, such as like refineries and data centers, they all require an own service customer station. So I was doing the station design, the public conduit design, the cable design, the billing, the metering, and networking with developers, commissioning with the start to finish with the construction. So, you network with a lot of people inside and outside DWP. So I stayed there for that long because I thought it'd be a great way to network. And the reason why I got hired with DWP is that the hiring process takes a while, but when I first got that first round interview, the person who was hiring me, he knew about my first company. And the thing is with DWP is that they ask you a standard set of questions, but they also may ask, depending on how you answer it, they may ask you segue questions. Like for instance, like how would you design this system? And I say, oh, I designed this wireless telecommunication system over fiber optic interface using cameras. And he said, oh, what kind of cameras? And he's like, oh, fixed cameras, pan tilt cameras. I designed it over this frequency band here to mitigate noise and whatever. But basically, just be prepared. Whatever's on your resume, be prepared to answer them accordingly. But not just LADWP, but any water and power municipality, I suggest, working or hiring, applying for these companies. Because let's say you don't get past a nice score of 90 in DWP, the rule is you have to wait a year to actually apply again. So, I suggest you could work for Anaheim, Burbank, or any other ones. They have great, pension programs and benefits. So, yep, go ahead.
Oh, someone's asked, why did you have your heart set on DWP? What drew you to them 3 times?
Well, my classmate actually told me about it, and I heard about that they had a telecommunication division, and I was always drawn to the electronics of it. And I didn't really realize it at the time. I thought telecommunications could be hands-on, you start building things, but as you get into a larger company, you do more of design and contract administration and project management. You don't get to build a lot of things, but you do a lot of like troubleshooting. So I was always drawn to that aspect of it, the whole design aspect, because I heard a couple of engineers who worked there and they worked in the telecommunication world. And once I got into my first job, I thought, oh, we work with DLP, and now I know even more. I want to work here even more, and I thought, okay, there was a lot of good aspects to it. I didn't even know about all the benefits when I was interested in it. They have a 980 schedule. I mean, we have tuition reimbursement. We pretty much pay for your master's degree fully. We get like a 70% pension on your retirement after about 30 years, more or less. I mean, there's a lot of good benefits to working here. And not to mention the high salary that people talk about.
So I know that you've got to build your own team there. Are you involved in hiring people and part of the interview process?
I'm hiring internally as a first level supervisor. Outside, I haven't been, I guess, given that responsibility. I mean, I have came to the job fairs, so I have given tips to students, just what things that they can work on. So I have been active, outside, but just not too much in the external hiring.
Right. So internal hiring, I'm just looking at, now you're looking at it from the other side of it. Is there anything that was like an aha moment in terms of being on that side of the table, the internal hiring?
Yeah, I mean, also, there's two ways to get DWP. You can apply through the on-campus interview, which is the best way, or you can apply through the public city area. But the public city one, there's a lot more competition, and the questions that they asked me were a lot more, I guess, out of the box thinking. And the first couple of times that I was interviewing with them, I didn't have power experience because that's not what I majored in, nor is that my experience in. I was in telecommunications, so when they asked me a question like a basic question about power, I didn't know how to answer it. So I would say the best thing to do is to just gain a variety of skills or knowledge, at least just top level things that you will pretty much learn when taking your engineering and training license, like just very top level knowledge. And also, so usually the questions don't kind of vary. There's not a lot of variation in them because in the public sector, it's pretty much a standard checklist of questions that we ask. But you can put your own twist to it, and you can really show your knowledge. And if they're really interested, they'll actually ask more segue questions.
Just quickly, somebody asked how large an area of LA do you handle?
So when I was working in customer station design, I pretty much handled, there are about 5,000 what we call industrial stations and 1,000 commercial stations. So in my group that I was previously in, we handled anywhere from the harbor section near San Pedro all the way up to the Valley and Chatsworth area. So there's all these internal basin stations, and it's very fun and exciting work. We call that the new business engineering group, but it's also very demanding because you deal with a lot of politics, but you also get to network with a lot of developers, and you kind of gain that relationship and rapport with them.
Great.
Okay, let's see. So the pros, you get to work with a lot of people. We have about 11,000 employees. I think 10 to 11,000 employees in DWP. I got to network with a lot of developers and a lot of engineers outside who I still keep contacts with. I mean, one tip is that try to keep a good list of Outlook contacts. I have about 2,000 Outlook contacts to this day. Just now working with so many people. The cons of working at DWP, I wouldn't say there's any cons. I still work here. I don't want to get fired, but like any company, there are politics. The con could be that you can get siloed into something, meaning you're doing one thing, and if you're not willing to branch out and learn something, you could be stuck doing something for for so many years. But also when a larger company, you tend to be not hands-on, but the good thing about it is that you can kind of do project management, and a large company, everyone knows everyone really. So don't burn any bridges. Be friendly but professional with your colleagues. And also don't get comfortable doing one thing. You might get complacent and skills get rusty. And I became too comfortable and I should have left my group probably a couple, 1 to 2 years ago. And I got too distracted by the money than the actual work. But you know, money will always be a byproduct as long as you focus on your skills and yourself and your passion. So that's a tip that I have.
So, someone asked, you mentioned at one point you were trying to learn everything. I am currently at this stage and feel like I'm spreading myself too thin. Any suggestions on how to approach this stage?
I would try to branch out and see what you're most good at. For me, it was more like RF telecommunications, but I applied it both in the industrial world and in the manufacturing world. So I kind of marketed myself toward that side. And a lot of the jobs will ask you, okay, you have to have a minimum of 3 years experience or 3 to 5 years experience. So I suggest doing that. And if you get into a larger company, they'll probably the knowledge that you will learn is that you have to project manage more than just one discipline, you know, electrical, structural, civil, mechanical. And those kind of companies would be useful to have, like, be a jack of all trades actually. So, you know, just because you have, like, you're spreading yourself thin into so many areas and discipline, it's not necessarily a bad thing. If you really want to work for a large company, let's say like AECom or I don't know, Davis Reed or one of those large companies that bid on large projects, then it may be a good thing. You know, if you really want to do more project management, and project management is actually really good, useful skill, and it not doesn't just apply to engineers. It applies to every discipline. Everyone can be a project manager if they can handle and multitask the workload. I think it just all depends on what you really want to do. If you really want to do more of like a niche, or if you want to do more of like a developer and, you know, larger corporation, then jack of all trades would kind of be a good thing actually.
What are the most satisfying aspects of your work?
Um, currently I just recently became a supervisor, probably within the last 6 months. But I would probably have to speak on behalf of my station design work. The most, I guess, exciting experience was that every day was, you know, dynamic and changing, and it was very stressful actually. And there's this connotative impression that DWP is actually lazy and overpaid, but after working there, I would say it was the most busiest time that I had in the department. And it was really exciting, and you get to, I would say the most exciting part was that you're exposed to so much, you know. And I it was already 10 to 11 years after I graduated, and I thought, wow, I'm still learning, you know. For me, I was always intent on getting the skills, getting the experience, networking. If you had all those three things, then I thought, okay, I would consider that a successful career as long as you were happy. I mean, personally. So yeah, I would feel like the exciting thing for me was just the dynamic of everything, because I like doing a little bit of everything. Yeah.
So it sounds like you enjoy going to work there. That's half the
Yeah.
battle, right?
Right. Yeah. Well, yeah. It's as long as you're happy going in and out of work, you know, you never work a day in your life, really, right? Um, so I just want to wrap this up with a concluded slide here. So point one, you know, just have some grit. You know, if you really want that job, you'll get it eventually. It just depends on how badly you want it. For me, you know, I told myself that my future is not predicated on my current circumstance. You know, it was pretty much life or death. You know, I was literally going to starve if I didn't get a job. Now, now I can afford, uh, you know, boba with my wife or something. Look at the other side of the menu when she orders food. So just try to get an internship, you know, while still in college. But I couldn't, though. It was really hard for me. Um, Point three, you know, finding that job. You know, here's a tip: just, you know, maybe put down playing Animal Crossing, whatever you're doing right now. Tailor your resume and cover letter to each job. You know, use keywords to the job description, research about the company, and tailor it to your resume. just, look into it before you go into an interview. You don't want to be blindsided and not know what they do. Okay. So, use out of the box tips that I gave earlier. Learn to interview, Google some tips, dress appropriately, wear conservative clothing, as, despite what I'm looking like right now, but, dress appropriately. So look online, keep a running log of questions asked, try to practice with a friend, and use a video camera as necessary, but also have a sense of personality. It depends on the job you actually apply for. So if you're more of an art major, they may ask you more out of the box thinking. But for me, I had a friend who actually just, I think they asked him about like, oh, what do you like doing on your free time? Just to see where his creativity is. And he said, like to play board games. For me, I like to play some games with my wife. I like to play Dungeons and Dragons as well. Just have a sense of personality as well in case they ask you some out of the box questions. As for a higher degree, and I gave my tips on that, I would say try to gain the skills now to get that entry level job, or at least to get that mid-level job. But once you're in that company you want to go for, I suggest trying to get into a company that'll pay for your master's degree. Some will pay 30%, 50%, 100% of your master's degree. They'll even pay, for my company, we pay master's in engineering if you're an engineer, master's in accounting, or your master's in business administration. So we pay that 100% as of right now. We have a great tuition reimbursement program. So also, if you can't find a job in a year, or at least that's the ultimatum I gave myself, I personally suggest, to not get in more debt with a higher degree. But, I suggest once you're in the company, just go for that higher degree. So let's see. So for, I suggest also to, take chances early on. If you really want to start your own company, I would say do it early on in your career, because, when you get older, you have a house, you have, you're married, you got more responsibilities, you want to take less risk. So, try to take chances early on. I think it's important because you don't really want to have regret as to what you're doing. I would feel like every experience that I've been through in the private sector has brought me to this point where I feel like, at least I tried, and I could say that. So also I heard for, oh, I'm sorry. In a large company, you tend to get kind of siloed into something. Try to go for a company that has a high learning curve, what you're doing day in and day out. That exposure will force you to find, like your passion and what you really want to do in your career. And let's say for freshmen of this, or people who don't know what to major in, I heard that there's a company actually where you can pay a small fee, and you can actually get exposure to what you're doing. So if you want to major in accounting, you can actually pay a small fee, actually do accounting from the get-go, and then see if you like it, rather than spending the money and time on a major that you don't really want to do. So I can't remember the company at this point, but I think there's a company like that.
Pat, when you talk about networking, I know you're going to be talking about it, but are there any associations or organizations that you belong to that you would recommend some of our younger students and some of the younger alum to, or anyone really, to look into joining and networking, and maybe finding that there's opportunities elsewhere as well?
Yeah, I mean, there's local organizations within the companies, but if you're outside the company, I would say the best thing to market yourself would actually just be through LinkedIn, because it's become such like a public thing where people actively look at it. And because of the skills I have now, actually, I get a lot of offers from, random people or from previous people that I know. So like, oh, do you want to design this for Chevron, or this, you want to build this communication system, or how would you design this station? I have developers asking me all the time. Now I'm at this point where I don't really have to find a job. The job kind of looks for me at this time. So, just I was part of like Tau Beta Pi and Eta Kappa Nu and part of electrical associations. I think Tau Beta Pi, I haven't really been active in any of them, but for electrical engineers, I mean, we have the IEEE, which is a very active community. I suggest, signing up for that. And fire protection engineering, and we have the NFPA. So, try to be part of that community as well, because especially for fire protection engineering, it's a very small community. So once you're in there, they kind of know who you are if you're always there online. So if that's something you want to get into, um, just try to get your skills, get your experience, get your networking, and then eventually the job will come after you. Just try to get to that point. At least you have some job security. But for me personally, in a company, I like to constantly learn, design, serve, and build, product and business. And also, just don't think just because you made 100,000 this job, you'll make 150,000 the next. It doesn't really work that way. You can't use money as a parameter to dictate your success in your career. Money will always be a byproduct to investing in yourself. It's not defined by how much money you come by. So personally, rethink climbing that corporate ladder at the expense also of your values. There are people that'll probably cheer you on, but there are those who enjoy tearing you down as well. I've had situations where, I'd scratch your back, you stab mine kind of attitude. It wasn't, it's, just try to keep open-minded, be open to suggestions, but, be unapologetic, exude confidence, but stay grounded as well. It's a very difficult thing as a skill to learn, after I graduated, but eventually I got the hang of it.
Pat, where do you see yourself now? Is this where you want to stay? Do you feel like you're engaged enough and there's a lot of different things you can do in LADWP?
Yeah, I feel like the company is so wide that there's so many divisions that you can kind of branch in and out of. So I think it's a great thing for top level experience, but a lot of the positions here are more contract administration, project management. So you don't gain too many hands-on skills, but how can you, I guess, how can you manage what you've never done hands-on? So that's kind of the thing where I came out, where I've done the hands-on, so I can be able to project manage as well. And for myself, I thought this is a good job for me, 5-10 years from now to actually, well, I'm still getting offers with consulting. So, a lot of the people who have been contacting me are like, developers, previous companies, so consulting may be something that I may want to do in the future, but it's all about time and money, really. It's where do you want to put your time and such, and staying DWP is a good stable job in terms of a pension. After a certain amount of years, I've been here for about 7 years or 6 years now. So it's a great way to kind of like gain stability, but also, just building that capital needed to do also other things as well. So maybe there's minimum retirements you can do based on your pension. So for me, if I ever did want to leave, I could, but I probably don't see myself. There's so many things to learn here too, within the public sector and outside the company, where I'm still networking actually at this point.
Someone's asking, what does a typical day in the field or the office look like for you?
For me in particular at this point, so I'm in fire protection engineering. So that doesn't mean I just do like fire alarms and suppression. There's a lot of administrative things that we have to do, but we have to design, and then, let's say a fire alarm design, fire detection design. We have to work actively with the construction after we send out a work package for them to construct from. So we have to commission it with them. So I'm actively going on the field, working with construction, making sure that's commissioning correctly. So I would say maybe 1 out of 5 days of the week, I'd probably go on the field. So you not only do you design, but you get to see it on the field, even though I'm not actually building it. So that's actually the interesting part of where I work right now. We also do a lot of capital improvement jobs. So if you have a lot of structural experience, civil design, conduit experience, mechanical experience in terms of like ventilation, or even just piping. I mean, that's all skills that I use to this current day in terms of designing and running projects as point. So I feel like, yeah, I feel like getting an eclectic amount of skills is, I use it every day, day in and day out.
We're not going to let you go today without talking about how COVID has impacted your company, both customers, the future of some of the work that you do, and and just individually in your own group.
Yeah, so currently, COVID, and amidst all things, currently there's the pandemic, the rioting, and possible resurgence of COVID-19. So I think right now we're like at stage 3. So we're pretty much following the City of LA plan. Right now, I'm telecommuting probably most of the time, but if there's any disturbance calls, I have to go on the field. But I have to go into the office probably 1 to 2 times per week. Me personally, I'm working, on the weekends just to do some testing and commissioning and stuff that's like outside the daily work times. So there's a lot of back-end stuff that I'm doing in terms of, running or maintaining the power utility. So yeah, that's a lot of telecommuting and a lot of platforms. You use Google Hangouts, MS Teams, WebEx Teams, Zoom. So we're just trying to limit the exposure, and of course we're keeping that 6-foot distance. And it went from 10 personnel to a meeting to 5 personnel a meeting, and I just learned today it's 6 personnel for a meeting. And as much as possible, we try to run meetings outdoors where there's more ventilation, less exposure.
One last question. I know you're in fire prevention, and so this is a high time also for any electrical company, right?
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
How's that?
because how's that? Yeah, so I'm sure there's a lot of the fire department is on DWP for making sure that a lot of our equipment is maintained, but we have so many facilities and stations that we have to maintain. So my group is a relatively small group at the time, but because of all this exposure and try to mitigate any nuisance fires, yeah, I think I'm getting a lot more busy lately.
And I know you have a meeting at 10 o'clock, so any last words from you to the group in general?
I didn't realize what time it is already.
Well, it's about, yeah,
Okay.
9:53, so.
Okay, so I guess, don't be attracted to the prestige or the money from a company, really. In smaller companies, you can learn a lot of skills in a short amount of time, but you can also find your niche and your passion. Typically in large companies, the less hands-on you are, but it's more contract administration and project management, which is fine, but how can you effectively design and manage what you've never done? So just try to gain the skills early on, be kind to yourself. I have this phrase, the road to success does not come with a map. So, different ways to be successful on your own terms. So that's pretty much my disclaimer, and you can forget everything I just presented about, so.
Great. Well, then we're going to kick it over to Noemi now, because we want to make sure you don't miss your next meeting.
Sure.
Noemi?
Thank you, Lucia, and thank you, Matt. It was a great discussion. Definitely, stress the networking with everyone you meet. Like, I love your example of the subway. You never know who's going to be next to you and who you're going to meet that might be able to give you an opportunity. Thank you, everyone, for joining us today. As a reminder, this session was recorded and it will be living on our website. Remember to follow us on social media at CSUB Alumni to learn about future programming. And thank you, everyone.
Thank you. Thank you, Matt.
Thank you, everyone. Bye.
Bye.